Oh, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into Snow The Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, the People's Podcast, Players Podcast, Prognosticators Podcast, Pedialyte Podcast, the Change of Plans Podcast. Yes, it is a change of plans. If you were monitoring the stream earlier today, if you were monitoring what was on YouTube and Facebook, you'll notice that there's been a change in programming. It actually kind of worked out. So we were going to have Ty Murchison on, who is a prospect, and can get into that in a little bit. We were going to have him on. But then the news of the day that really kind of carried Flyers Twitter from around noon until now, where everything is burning down as you would expect. The decision was made, probably not the best episode to have Ty Murchison on the show, because we have to get into what people are actively talking about, which is the acquittal of Carter Hart and 4 other players in the Hockey Canada trial and what that could ultimately mean for your team, your town, your Philadelphia Flyers. So Ty Murchison will be next week. Another programming note, the second interview of our Dev Camp series will go live on the Snow The Goalie channel Friday at noon. That's none other than second Flyers first round pick, Jack Nesbitt. That was a lot of fun. We can talk about that on the show as well. That'll hit the podcast feed over the weekend. So a lot of stuff going on. Gentlemen, how are we doing? Ant over on Twitter, at SanFilippo, Bundy at Therien6. Ant, I'll start with you. How you doing? I like your Charlie Sheen shirt.
Yes, very, very Charlie Sheen shirt. That's absolutely, yeah. What was his famous line? Winning.
I didn't.
Right?
Oh, nah. Was it winning? Yeah, winning. Yeah,
winning. Yeah, I'm winning with this shirt.
Okay.
No, it's it's summertime, guys. It's I had to be away from home for a little bit. I'm not on vacation, but I was I'm not in the house. And so I was like, oh, we're going to go outside in the heat, I got to put on a shirt that's kind of summerish. So that was the idea.
Okay. Yeah. Look at you. Bundy, how you doing?
It's been a really tough week. The loss of Ozzy Osbourne, the great legendary Hulk Hogan today. I mean, if you want to, you also Theo Huxtable on
horrible.
Sunday or Monday.
That was tragic.
Warner. It's been a bad week for 80s kids. And today, I don't know. Today really it kind of hit me with Hulk finding out Hulk Hogan died. I mean, that really was kind of stung me. He was a very influential person to me in the 80s, as he was to millions and millions of people around the world. And I'm sad to see that happen. It's been a sad week.
One of my all-time favorite Saturday Night Live episodes was when Hulk Hogan and Mr. T co-hosted in 1985-ish. Right before WrestleMania. This was when, it really kind of was getting big, right? Wrestling was going, off the charts for the first time, WWF. And they sat in on a skit with Billy Crystal playing Fernando Lamas. And Billy Crystal doing Fernando Lamas always used to say, "You look marvelous, darling, simply marvelous." And he kept doing that whole bit with them, and they kept breaking character the entire time. Both Hulk Hogan and Mr. T, they couldn't keep it. Mr. T, who obviously, he's always had that tough guy, pity the fool thing going on, and he was just laughing like a school child during that whole skit. And it was one of my favorite episodes of Saturday Night Live just because of those guys. It was great.
Yeah.
As a kid growing up in the 90s, there's something iconic about the Bash at the Beach heel turn. Hulk Hogan comes out, right? You have the Outsiders, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash. Who's the third man? And then Bobby the Brain Heenan says, "Yeah, but whose side is he on?" I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And then he drops the big leg on Macho Man, starts the NWO. I should have worn my NWO shirt. I do have an NWO shirt. I should have worn it. Hulk Hogan, very complicated man, very complicated legacy in pro wrestling. Look it up if you're unfamiliar with some of the stuff that he was caught on tape saying, but a legend in pro wrestling nonetheless. Gentlemen, I feel like we have to get into the big news of the day.
Yes.
If that's okay. I ordered a chicken sandwich at the pool, and it was a great chicken sandwich. That was the news of no. Carter Hart. It is a name that has come up. If you remember, his last game in the orange and black was January 20th, 2024. When he departed from the team, he left a .906 save percentage in his wake. I think he was at like a 2.8 goals against average. He was having a good-ish season, not a great team in front of him. And as he kind of parted ways with the team, there was no There was no scorched earth that happened with this team and organization, which we kind of found interesting at the time. And in the time that has followed, it seems as though they've mutually parted ways. It was respectful, whatever. The verdict finally comes down today that Hart, along with the 4 other players who were named in a Hockey Canada trial that were accused of some pretty awful things, ultimately the judge found that the Crown did not meet the burden of proof. As such, all 4 players have been acquitted. And now there are questions about what happens next. Will any of them be eligible to join the league? Will there be an appeal process? Which I can't imagine there will be. And ultimately, will a team sign Carter Hart? I think we can all probably agree. The answer is yes. Some team will likely get in on signing Carter Hart at some point between now and the end of the season. Will it be now? Will it be halfway through the season? Will it be ahead of training camp? I wanted to get your initial thoughts here because I've seen a lot of conjecture online about the appeal process. And if you remember Mitch Miller, who the Bruins tried to sign after some awful allegations, the league had said he was going to have to go through an appeal process to get back in. I believe Quenneville and or Babcock had to do the same thing. In this case, it's players that have been acquitted. And regardless of how people feel about those accusations and about the trial and everything, if you've been acquitted, should there be an appeal process to get back in? Have you gotten any additional understanding about what the process is going to be for these guys? Where are you at?
Well, I think ultimately, guys, they're going to take a little bit of time with this. I don't think that anybody's going to rush to this. I mean, everybody wants to rush to judgment right away. The Crown came out after the case on the steps of the courthouse, and they didn't give an answer on whether or not they're going to appeal. They basically said they're going to review the court's decision, and then they'll make a determination on what the next steps will be thereafter, right? So I can't imagine that the NHL will respond as far as reinstatements are concerned until after it's determined whether there's going to be an appeal. Because if in fact the Crown appeals and you have to go through another court process, I think that delays things a lot further, right? Yeah. Because you never know what could happen upon appeal. I think it's probable that these guys are acquitted and they're going to stay acquitted, but you just never know. So, I mean, really kind of depends. Maybe if the Crown finds something that they want to get persnickety about and go after, a higher court's ruling or whatever, then they will. But otherwise, I think you're probably looking at this being what it is. If in fact that's the case, then the NHL has to make a determination what they're going to do. Are they just going to simply reinstate them? Are they going to reinstate them with supplemental punishment, basically for, bad representation of the league, et cetera, et cetera? That's to be determined as well. If in fact there's supplemental discipline, I got to imagine that the Players Association would then fight back and appeal that additional discipline, right? So depending on what that discipline is and depending on that appeal, I think that you're probably still looking at time before players or teams start going, okay, we want to sign these guys. And and the final thing I'll say is, let's be realistic here. With the exception of Carter Hart, are any of them really NHL caliber guys right now? I got to think the other 4 guys, they were bottom 6 players, bottom of the lineup players at best. And some weren't even in the NHL. One guy was playing in the K. I got to think that that's probably where they start, or something of that ilk. Hart's the one guy who you look at and go, yeah, he could probably get back up to speed because he was good enough to play in the league. So he's probably the one guy teams would have immediate interest in. But I still think that there's going to be a process that needs to play out before that happens.
Just to be clear, I've seen a lot of people asking in the comments about double jeopardy. Apparently in the Canadian courts, if there is a belief that there was a legal error made in the original case, you can appeal in the case of the Crown. So It's an acquittal. In theory, we look at it as Americans go, that's double jeopardy, it can't work. In theory, it can. But it's a legal basis. I don't know what that would look like. I mean, there was the mistrial declared where they got rid of the jury. Then there was the reapplication of it where the judge ended up determining that they were going to be the ones, she was going to be the one to issue the verdict, not another jury. Feels like it was really kind of overly complicated to some extent. I don't know if it looked like you were going to jump in there, Ant.
No, I was going to say, I mean, like, maybe from a legal perspective, the Crown looks at it and says, hey, this is how this was operated by this judge. We lost. We had a mistrial. We had a dismissal of a jury. We had evidence that wasn't allowed to be,
entered in evidence.
In court. Like, there's a lot of things that maybe the Crown can look at and say, do we want to continue to pursue this? But maybe they look at it and say, also, we probably could do that, but are we going to get a different outcome the next time? Is the juice worth the squeeze in a lot of regard in that regard? So I think that's really what they're going to take their time to look at here over the next couple of weeks. They may not take the full 30 days to decide. They may, make a determination within a week or two that they're not going to pursue an appeal. But you got to at least give the Crown the time to consider that and think about that, because that is their right.
Bundy, to Ant's point a little bit ago, the idea of like teams maybe starting to approach the idea of of bringing any of these guys in. I believe 4 of them had been playing in the NHL or AHL at the time. Fermenton, I think, was playing in the KHL or playing in Sweden or something. Hart obviously was here with the Flyers. Just on the surface, do you think teams have had this conversation already about potentially bringing in one of these guys? I mean, it's been almost 2 years. By the time some of these guys take the ice, it might actually be 2 years from the time they last played in the league. Do you think these conversations have already been underway and now it's just a matter of the waiting game?
That's a really good question, Russ, and I'm not 100% sure on that, but I would assume with the amount of dead time that you can sometimes find in a management office, especially this time of year, I can't imagine that the names of these players weren't addressed somehow, some way, some form, just amongst management groups themselves, talking about the possibilities if they were found not guilty or they were cleared of this. So of course there's going to be smoke around that fire. I'm just not really sure at the limits. I think Anthony made a really good point. Outside of Hart, how viable are the other options that are out there? And I'm not sure that teams are going to be racing to that. Hart is still relatively young in terms of the goaltender position. Has had experience in the league. And if teams want to have a look at these guys, how would they do that? They haven't played in some time. There will require perhaps a way for them to go out and examine or take a look at these players playing or practicing under some sort of controlled environment that gives them an idea of what they look like, at least have an idea of what they look like, because there's been no game film or anything to go over. So it's a lot of weird stuff. I haven't followed into the detail that Anthony just kind of threw out there with all the legalities and the Crown and the appeals and the double jeopardy and all that. I'm not really in tune to how all that plays out. But from a standpoint of NHL teams at least kicking tires, I can assure you that there's been teams that have kicked these tires, no doubt.
Yeah. So before we get into like the hockey case for these guys, the one thing that I think is probably sort of worth touching on here is that you're in a weird spot legally, I think, if you're the league. And this idea of having to appeal to get back in, or like the league gets to dictate if these guys qualify. In the case of the other 4 players, if they never play in the league again, especially for the 3 that were between the AHL and NHL, I wonder if there's further litigation between those players and the league for lost wages. Like if they ultimately don't get another opportunity, do they try to make the case that they've been blackballed? I think Hart's going to get back in the league, so I don't think it's as big of a deal there. If they try to create an appeal process for these guys after acquittal, I do wonder if like a Hart then sits back and says, all right, well, this is a little bit different, because if you're being now held out of potentially earning wages from, like say a team wants to bring him in September or something, and now he's losing wages from September through December, whatever that arbitrary date is, I almost wonder if the league is going to be hesitant to get themselves opened up to further litigation. And by the way, wasn't the league supposed to, Anthony, put out their own investigation, the results of their own investigation, what it found? And boy, has shit gotten very quiet on that front. Just saying.
No, you're right, Ross. I mean, look, I think that there's a lot of people that end up looking bad here. Mm-hmm. I think that the Crown doesn't look good, because I thought that their presentation of the case was pretty shoddy. I think that Hockey Canada is a disaster. and the people who were running Hockey Canada at that time, those people really need to be held accountable. I think they've kind of flown under the radar because of all this, all the focus on this trial and these players. But I think that the leadership of Hockey Canada at that time really needs to be held to the fire. I think the NHL looks bad for how they've handled it. I think that they didn't handle it very well. So there's a lot of egg on a lot of faces today. That being said, we're in a situation here where people are going to the court of public opinion will be its own thing.
Yeah.
Regardless of what, and it would have been regardless of what the outcome was today, right? I mean, if the judge ruled the other way, there still might have been some public opinion a certain way. So that's going to exist. And I think that when any team in the NHL considers bringing any one of these guys in, first and foremost, they got to be sitting there saying, okay, if we do, what's the PR plan? Mm-hmm. And secondly, once we have an idea of what that plan is it worth it? Is it worth it for us to then, go through what we're going to go through just to bring that player into play for us? And that's why I don't think that there's going to be a rush on this. I don't think this is something that you're going to see one of these guys or two of these guys sign in a week or two. Yeah.
So there's another point to this that I think is interesting. I want to gauge your interest. I just put a poll up over on the Snow The Goalie YouTube account. The question is just simple. Should the Flyers bring back Carter Hart? I want to get a gauge of this audience because earlier today on the Russ Joy show, I spent 2 hours online. I did not mean to be 2 hours. We were on there for 2 hours as people, the amount of comments on that stream were insane. But we finally got to, at about like the hour 45 mark, the actual final verdict. The judge essentially came out and said, no burden of proof. And then it took 3 hours or whatever to actually say, like, not guilty. There's an element to this that I think the Flyers need to investigate. Hear me out. You have to try to look at the hockey player in a vacuum. You have to remove however you feel at home about these accusations and about the testimony and regardless of how you feel, if it was justice, if it wasn't, all that, take all that out. Carter Hart was going to be a restricted free agent. And whether it was the league told the Flyers you can't extend a qualifying offer, whether it's the Flyers chose not to extend a qualifying offer, I tend to think that the league probably said, let it go while this is being determined. The Flyers in theory would have retained the rights to the player. We know, Anthony, and we discussed this on the show, well in advance of these things coming out, that there were teams that were interested in Carter Hart for as much as 2 years about potentially exploring trades. They had his RFA rights. They effectively had to renounce them. There is a part of me that thinks from an organizational perspective, regardless of if you want to bring the player back, the Flyers should be given those rights again. They should be given that exclusive negotiating window that they would have had at the end of 2024 to either negotiate with the player, bring him back on what you would assume is going to be a pretty cap-friendly deal, all things considered, or if they don't want him, to be able to trade those exclusive negotiating rights as they would with any other RFA. And for one of those teams that we would assume could be interested, whether it's a Carolina, could it be an Edmonton, could it be a Seattle, a Columbus, they should have at least a little bit of an ability to get something back if they don't want the player. I don't know why the Flyers organization should effectively be punished for having nothing to do with the allegations in the trial. Does that all make sense?
Yes, it does. It makes a lot of sense, Russ, but that doesn't necessarily. See what happens as you get older? You start getting a little wiser, right?
Yeah.
You start getting a little wiser. So, these are the things that, like I said, NHL kind of botched this in a lot of ways. And one of the things that you just kind of talked about was one of them. I mean, there's no question about it, but I don't see a way. I don't see how you're going to create a situation and have a set a precedent for the future where you have an unrestricted free agent and you can go, you know what? Change of plans. You're back to being exclusive negotiating rights with the team you were on before.
Maybe did you say unrestricted or restricted?
Unrestricted.
Well, he was going to be an RFA.
I understand that.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that once the Flyers followed the league's, followed the league's guidance, which is, and all these teams did. It wasn't like just the Flyers. All the teams did that were involved, and they did not offer they let him go, and he's parted ways, and he becomes unrestricted. I don't see how the league can then just revert back to what it was before, and say, oh well, this is a special case, because somewhere down the line there's going to be another special case, and there's going to be another special case, and the argument for the Players Association at that time will be, oh, but you did it in 2025, you need to do it now too, or you need to blah blah blah, unless it's collectively bargained into their contract, which it wasn't in the new CBA. At least I don't think it was. I doubt it was. I think that this isn't a time to set precedents for the future. I think that they have to live with the decision that they made.
I think the Flyers who are listening to this show should try to get whatever they can. Now, let's get to this question. Should the Flyers actually bring back Carter Hart? So, Bundy, we know that last year was a disaster. There's no getting around it. Sam Ersson had 4 groin injuries, not ideal. You had the rotating cast of Ersson with Fedotov, who had moments where he looked kind of like an NHL goalie. Kolosov, who very rarely did look like an NHL goalie. They had 3 of them up. They were trying to constantly work that triad into net. It did not work. There's nobody at the minor league level as of last year who makes you say, oh, hell yeah, that's the guy to go with. Bjarnason, probably should get the bulk of the starts with Lehigh Valley this year. But, on the whole, Hart, if he's able to be anything like he was almost 2 years ago, would represent an upgrade. I guess the question is, when you look at it, do you go, it's worth the gamble, or it's worth the potential PR backlash?
Can I just throw something? Yeah, can I throw something at you guys real fast?
Yeah.
Global News in Canada put out a story, and they got a statement from the NHL. Now, this doesn't surprise me that this is what the statement is right now, because, again, like I said earlier, I think that there are steps to this. But according to globalnews.ca, this is the statement from the NHL. The allegations made in this case, even if not determined to have been criminal, were very disturbing, and the behavior at issue was unacceptable. We will be reviewing and considering the judge's findings. While we conduct that analysis and determine next steps, the players charged in this case are ineligible to play in the league. Again, not surprising. Like I said, I think it's that's a temporary response from the league. And I do think that you're going to get the PA will ultimately push back against this. And there's going to be something. But I think that that's at least worth putting out there for now. I don't think that that's a definitive statement. I think that that is just what it is today.
Okay. So, Bundy, back to you. Question was, just given everything, given the fact that there's going to be some kind of public backlash, some fans, so there's going to be a large chunk of the fans that if Hart gets brought back are going to be thrilled. And there's going to be a chunk that's going to say, I will not support this team. I had those people in my comments on my show earlier today. Do you think that based on the way that the player was kind of heading, the fact that it's been a nearly 2-year layoff, given what his numbers were before, how he was developing, do you think it's worth the potential organizational headache and the potential PR issue, at least until he starts playing, that it's worth it?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I can think, and there's been other cases, I'm sure, in the league, maybe not quite exactly like this, but a case that comes to mind was in terms of fan backlash, and even my own personal reaction as an Eagles season ticket holder was when they signed Michael Vick. And I remember at the time, I brought my daughters to the game, and they even knew what had happened with the dogs, and they just hated that. They were little girls at the time. So, again, that was just awful. And yet, he somehow made his way back to being a starting quarterback in the NFL. It depends how much people want to deal with the backlash that you're going to pay from some people for this. Yes, you're going to have some people who are going to be thrilled. They're sportsmen. They don't care about whatever else it is. They just want to have the product on the ice or on the field, on the court, whatever is best for their city. to have the best product they can. But then there are people who are going to say exactly what that global read that Anthony just presented to us was. Yes, they may be innocent by that judge's standards, but still what transpired was not up to snuff of the way you want your people representing your team or their own families and themselves as people. So they're going to have that issue to deal with, and there's going to be fan backlash. I saw our good friend here, Andrew Fawcett, he put out earlier, he said if they bring back Carter Hart, he thinks he's out. You're going to get some of that, and then you're going to have people that, as you said, Russ, are probably going to be thrilled about it.
And do you think it's worth the headache?
I personally don't think it's worth the headache. I don't. I think that the Flyers should look at this from this perspective. Again, who knows where they really are on this. You got to remember, like I was told earlier, before the trial ever happened, don't ever expect Carter Hart to play here again. And now it seems like, well, he got acquitted. Maybe we could bring it. So we'll see. We'll see where they're at. But I'll tell you that I don't think that they should, for this reason. The Flyers lost a lot of equity in this town. And I know it's not the current group that did, right? But they lost a lot of equity in this town for a stretch of 6 or 7 years, right? Mm-hmm. And the current group with Jonesy and Briere and Hilferty, they're trying to build that back. And so far, they've done a nice job, right? They've done a really good job of getting it over the last couple of years. Why risk setting back the work that you've done over the last couple of years to bring in a player like that at this time? I just don't think that I think if the Flyers were in a much stronger position, if they were a team that was a goalie away from being a Stanley Cup caliber team, you could probably weather that storm, right? Mm-hmm. Because there will be enough people who care about the team winning to kind of say, well, this sucks, but we'll accept it. We'll do it, right? There's, as Bundy called them, sportsmen. They only care about the outcome of the team. But if you're still kind of building and you're still trying to regain the trust of the fans, I think you put yourself a little bit more at risk by doing this. Because what has to ultimately happen for Carter Hart, if he were, let's play the devil's advocate here. I don't know what the deal is or if he would even want to come back here for that matter. But let's just say that the stars align for Carter Hart and the Flyers. They re-signed, they brought him back. Okay. Whatever the court of public opinion is, it is. He goes out onto that ice. Doesn't he almost have to be perfect for the fans to accept him back? Like if he's mediocre or average, fans are going to be mad. Fans are going to be mad because he's not good enough as on the ice. Oh, and by the way, this cloud still lingers over him. I just think that there's so much there that would be a negative that I don't see what the positive is, at least not right now.
Yeah. The positive is the goalie situation sucks here. There's no getting around it. I mean, we could try to be like really flowery here and like tell people that Dan Vladar is going to be, some, revelation. He's probably not. He could be a good backup goalie. That's fine. We all liked Ersson, but Ersson can't stay healthy. Last year was like the worst case scenario for him. They finally, I mean, in essence, right? Like at the end of the 24 season, it was like, okay, this guy expected to be a backup. They had to throw him in and be the number one. That sucks. Take an off season, get yourself ready to be the number one. He couldn't stay healthy, which sucks. And maybe it's a one-off, and hopefully it is, and he plays really well, and everybody's happy. But like that's the trade-off here. The problem, obviously, is that like there is such a chasm, I think, in this fan base about like what the actual expectations are for this team. Like there are some people right now who are like, cool, Danny did nothing this offseason, and they're going to be in the bottom 10 again, and they're going to jump in the draft lottery just like New York, and they're going to get Gavin McKenna, and that's going to fix everything. I don't think it's going to happen. It really do. Even with this offseason not like bringing any star power to town, like I think the East sucks. I do. I don't think the Met got particularly better, and I think they're probably going to either squeak into the playoffs or be pretty damn close. I don't think you're getting a top 10 pick next summer. There are these other people who seem to believe like, Well, if you bring Carter Hart in, then all of a sudden you're a playoff team. And then you try to get in, and who the hell knows? I don't get it. This isn't a guy who had like a 930 save percentage. It's not a guy who had like a 940. This guy wasn't like popping shutouts game in and game out. Like, he was a good goalie relative to how bad the team in front of him was. But there's a headache here. Bundy, the point about Michael Vick is a great one. I talked about this earlier, but like, the difference, of course, is Vick went to jail, and this happened when he played for Atlanta. And then Jeffrey Lurie was able to say, I will bring this guy in and we will try to rehabilitate him. We will do that because Jeffrey Lurie had final say. In this case, you have a player who was a Philadelphia Flyer, had to go to trial, got acquitted, but even if Danny Briere and Keith Jones and Dan Hilferty, I have no idea how they feel about it. But let's assume for a second they all say, yeah, we want to bring Carter Hart back. It's not Dan Hilferty's call. Ultimately, it's Brian Roberts' call. It's Comcast Corporate's call. If Comcast Corporate says, we don't want this, this is not a good look for our much larger company. We do not want this. It doesn't matter what Danny and Jonesy and Dan Hilferty want. And I see a nod. Like, that to me is the biggest difference. Lurie had nobody to answer to. Hilferty and company, they don't own the team. The guy at the top of Comcast does. So, Ant, like, do you think that there could end up being that little back and forth, a little give and take, even if the front office and Hilferty, for example, said, yeah, like we're in, like we'd be open to it, that Brian Roberts could just come in and go, no, not happening.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, look, Comcast is good. They don't usually get involved at the corporate level with the running of the hockey team. But I think in a case like this, they would absolutely have to be consulted and weigh in. I mean, how do you not? How are you not? Right? I mean, the other thing is you have all these corporate partners, right? All the, that you're working with and that are paying you money to inside your new building that you just renamed after one of your products, and you're building a new arena, and you're going to want corporate partners there. Like, the timing of it is very difficult, and I think Comcast would be the ultimate say. And who knows how the individuals in Comcast Spectacor and the individuals in the Philadelphia Flyers feel. We don't really know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think that what you're saying is makes a lot of sense, Russ, because it's got to be Comcast Corporate's call on whether or not you can pull a trigger, assuming you wanted to bring him back, assuming he wanted to come back here, and assuming this is the offer that he wants to take and not an offer from another team.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing. What does the player want too? If he does get reinstated,
Sure.
What do the players want? So that's another big side of the coin too. Whether or not, I think the other question you kind of brought in is, it wasn't the Flyers' fault this happened. That they lost their asset out of it. So how do they, if there's some way out there, how do the Flyers get back something for what on? Because in the grand scheme of things, you may say, yeah, we didn't like the actions that took place by the players at all, but legally they were acquitted. So what does a team go to the NHL and say, what, you owe us something, what is it?
That's why I think the Flyers should get that RFA window. They should have that negotiating right. That was listen, at some point I'm sure we'll find out and it'll come out. Did the league tell the Flyers you can't offer a qualifying offer? Did the Flyers just make the decision we're not going to do it? If the Flyers ultimately chose we're not going to do it, I think that's one thing. If the league kind of said to them, don't extend a QO, then I think they should get that negotiating window. One other thing here really quick before we keep this going. I will answer this for myself, not for you guys. If you want to weigh in, you can. But Fishy says, crazy world where there is a conversation, that this is a conversation. He was acquitted, period. How can anyone hold anything against him? I'll speak as myself. His testimony I found not great. I thought that the overall things that he had to say on the stand, which, by the way, he was the only one of the 5 players to take the stand. I thought it was gross. I think the whole situation was gross. I can tell you confidently, I have never found myself in that situation. I wouldn't want my closest friends to ever be in that kind of situation. I hope that if nothing else comes from this whole thing, I hope that this is a lesson to anybody who's involved in Hockey Canada, who's involved in youth sports, teenagers, whatever. Don't put yourself in this kind of position. That's it. Right? Whether you thought that there was ultimately consent or not, which was obviously what the trial was about. Don't put yourself in that situation. This all kind of, I found it gross. I just think that conceptually, the whole thing was gross. That's it.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add to that, Russ, and I think you said it very, very well. The only thing I'll add to that is keep this in mind when it comes to courts, right? Mm-hmm. Just because you're found not guilty does not mean you are innocent. I mean, you may be, but it does not mean you are, right? Yep. It does not mean you are. If you read with what the judge said, it did not reach the level that it needed to be reasonable doubt for her to make a determination on the charges against these players. Okay, did not in her mind reach that point. Did that mean it was 0% that she looked at it? No, it just didn't get to beyond a reasonable doubt. It could have been close, but it didn't get there. So that's all. That's the one thing to keep in mind. That's the only thing that I wanted to add to it.
Which, by the way, you kind of find is like that sort of quagmire here, that legal gray area that it's a PR disaster. Like whoever ends up taking him, there is going to be a PR backlash. And I think we all agree on this. If Carter Hart were to get re-signed here, if he ultimately decided he wants to be a Flyer, and the Flyers and Comcast Corporate and everybody said, sure, let's have a reunion. That's fine. If he plays well, sports fans are fickle. Right? Like if he plays well and the Flyers get through that horrible October stretch, right, that we were talking about on the last episode about how awful it is. If they play well and he plays well, a lot of the backlash is going to go away. But Ann, I think you said it earlier. If you bring him in and he plays mediocre at best, no, that's not going to go down well at all. So anyway, we had a super chat come in. I think we had a couple, so I want to try to get to those. Ryan A., thank you for the super chat, Ryan. In Canadian currency, thank you, Ryan, says, can Ant offer any clarification? Was it the team's choice to not qualify Hart, or did the league decide Ottawa qualified for Menton to keep his rights?
Yeah, it's a great question, Ryan. And I wish I could give you some clarification. I don't know specifically. I mean, if you were to ask the team on the record, they're going to say that it was their decision. But it's very possible that the league let Fermenton go because he was the one guy who was not playing in the NHL or the AHL. So it was not really, it was one of those situations where you have a player who's playing overseas and may continue to play overseas, and they just held on to his rights, which you can hold on to forever when a player is playing overseas. Whereas the teams here in the NHL and the AHL, you're limited to 50 contracts, right? Those contracts are. So I think that that's part of it, right? I think that might be part of it. But beyond that, I can't give you an exact answer if the NHL dictated it. I do know that when everything was happening initially, and the report first came out, that everything that the Flyers said is we're following the league's guidance, and that was on the record that they were saying that we're following the league's guidance. We're following the league's guidance. I can't imagine that they broke from that guidance to do something on their own, especially because when it was happening, you had a brand new front office.
Yeah,
but it's possible. But I don't have I can't give you that clarification.
Bundy, I'm going to send the last question to you. By the way, thank you to Zach Anderson, who's on the same wavelength as everybody else. We all know that the Penguins are going to get the lottery rigged for them and get Gavin McKenna. Let's be real. We all know it's going to happen. There's one other topic that has to do with the Flyers, does not have to do with Carter Hart, that I want to make sure we get in here for a couple of minutes before we head out. And Bundy, that'll also come to you. But Stephen Van Horn, before we even went live, dropped a $10 super chat. So Stephen, thank you so much. Bundy, I ask you this because I feel like you would have the best answer for it. Stephen's question was, do you think Mr. Snyder would have stood by Hart even just a little? So maybe we can take that all the way back to the initial accusation and having to go to trial and everything. Very understandable why corporate giant Comcast ran from him with such great speed. Not a great look for what he admitted to. Do you think that Snyder would have been with him the whole way, backing the player? Do you think that maybe post acquittal or whatever might have been more outspoken? Or do you think that ultimately, like, he would have gone the same route here? Like, there is nothing to gain from weighing in either way.
Well, you're asking me to get into the head of Mr. Snyder, and that's not really fair to do that. But at the same time, in another world, in another lifetime, at a different time, I think that Ed Snyder would have stuck by his players no matter what. He was like that, like he would call a player if there was something, a family emergency somebody had. Snyder would make sure he got in touch with that player, reach out to guys when they had kids. He was just that kind of guy. He loved his players. He loved and cared very much for his players. And, if something happened to one of his players, I know for a fact that he'd want to know what was going on with that player, if he could help that player, and to stand by that person's side. So, again, and in that question, it does describe a two totally different worlds that we live in, where the big corporate giant will turn their head and run the other way, where you had a private owner in a different way of life at a different time. The world was that probably would have stuck by his player.
Okay. Now, I don't know how to transition to this, guys, but I think that we need to touch on it really quickly. How the fuck do we do this? There was another bit of news, and this probably would have led the show because it happened since we did our last episode. But the Flyers had a player who they drafted really highly, said that he wanted to try to make the team. But the news broke in the past week that Porter Martone is not going to compete for a spot with the Flyers, nor is he going to go to Penn State, breaking the heart of intern Andrew. He's going to go to Michigan State. Real quick, guys, do you think he made the right decision here? Obviously, the choice would have been try out for the Flyers, sign the ELC. If he doesn't make it, go to junior, get paid pennies, or go live the college lifestyle, probably get a nice payday via NIL, and then still have the opportunity to come up at the end of the year. Do you think ultimately this was the right call for the player and even for the organization?
I think it was absolutely the right call for both. I really do. You look at the situation where they were not certain that he was going to make the NHL roster. They thought there was a chance that he would do it, but they weren't 100% certain. And so rather than him, the Flyers would prefer, rather than him come into camp, not impress enough to make the team, and then had no other alternative than to go back to junior hockey where he would dominate and not get any better, kind of, be lateral move in that regard. This way, he goes and plays 6 months in college hockey against more adult players, more physically demanding to play in the NCAA. And then once his season's over, he can, either sign that ELC or do like a lot of these guys did last year. Like, yeah, we'll sign it for next year and go play with the Phantoms on an ATO, whatever. And you get that experience. Or he comes right into the NHL in March, and he plays the end of the season. The Flyers are in the hunt for a playoff spot. Maybe he plays 10 games at the end of the year and he helps the team make the playoffs. Yeah. Whatever, that's better for the Flyers. From the player's perspective, if you're Martone, what's the difference between, getting paid $700,000 to play at Michigan State, right? I mean, I got to imagine that's the kind of money that he got. And say, hey,
I think the low side's probably at least $500,000, right?
I think
you have to think so.
Yeah, I think he got 7 is what that's the number I hear. Whether it's accurate or not, I don't know. But I mean, I think it's probably close to that if it's not exactly accurate. But you get that, and then you can sign that same ELC 6 months later and basically make 2 salaries and still play in the NHL this year. And, you know what I'm saying? Like, for Martone, it makes so much sense. So I think it was right. I think the Flyers are happier with it. I think Martone is going to be happy with it. Gets a year in college. That'll be fun. Playing Big Ten, playing in the Big Ten on a really good team, and see what happens. I think it's a win-win for everybody.
Bundy?
I completely agree with everything Anthony just said. I think the Flyers aren't losing anything. They're going to have him in March. After the season's over, he'll be a little bit more ready to go then. He needs to work on his skating, especially his first 3 steps, something I noticed in development camp. And those are things that you can do with a little bit more practice in college rather than perhaps getting exposed at the NHL level, which you don't want as a young 18-year-old. So I think it's, Anthony said, win-win for everybody.
All right, good stuff, guys. We're going to head out. Big thank you to everybody who joined us on YouTube, Facebook, and X. If you haven't done so already, like the video. That really helps. share the video. That also helps. You can send it to a friend, a family member, an ex-girlfriend, ex-boyfriend, whoever you want. Doesn't matter. Whether they're going to respond or not, doesn't matter. Sharing the video helps. Subscribe to the channel, ring the bell so you get notified whenever show goes live. We'll have the interview with Jack Nesbitt from Development Camp. That'll hit the YouTube channel on Friday, and then it'll hit the podcast feed over the weekend. We're also going to have, I haven't told these guys yet because they don't care, but I'll tell you all this now. There's a community tab on the Snow the Goalie YouTube channel. To this point, it has been closed off. There is a chance that we're going to open it up to solicit feedback from viewers of the show, listeners of the show. And one of those things is Ant and Bundy and I are having conversations about doing some more content. There are different ways that we can do that. We'll talk about it on next week's show, but I want to kind of put it on everybody's radar that you might see some community posts going up in and on the YouTube channel. So if you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do it. So, Ant, Bundy, we'll be back next week. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure spending time with you again this evening.
Thanks, everybody.
See you, Russ.
Thanks for watching, maybe even listening to Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast. Talk to all of you next week. Have a great day, everybody.